IVM.
What impressed you about Lalit?
Well, like I said, I'd say he's the best client to have. You normally have to give the client all the credit, so he gets all the credit for the IPL. So actually, it was IMG who did the design, concept, business model, selling the media rights, selling the teams, right? But I have to give him a lot of credit because the brief that came to us was really, really good. It was better than many, many marketing briefs I've got when I was working in advertising. It laid down 1, 2, 3, 4 problems, and I like that.
Hello and welcome to the Filter Coffee podcast. The World Health Organization estimates that 1% of donation by the population is what a nation requires as the bare minimum to meet its needs as far as blood is concerned. In India, the shortage of blood is a whopping 1.9 million units. And this was before the pandemic. In the last 10-11 months, this situation has worsened, and we're probably going through one of the most unprecedented crises as far as blood shortage is concerned in this country. One organization that has been impacting this space positively for over a decade now is blooddonors.in. If you're a regular blood donor like me, this name probably is not new to you. It's actually quite ubiquitous on Twitter, and you will see this tagged along any or rather most blood donation messages. Balu Nair, who's the founder of this organization, is my guest today. And I want to speak to him about how this organization came about. There is a certain other industry that Balu has impacted as well, and that's cricket in India. The framework behind the Indian Premier League is something that Balu and his team had crafted back when he was heading IMG in 2008. I want to start the episode with that story. Welcome to the Filter Coffee podcast, Balu. So, we all know the IPL as something that a certain Mr. Lalit Modi had started at the BCCI. But I believe there is a larger story to this, which involves you, like I mentioned in the intro, while you were heading IMG in India. Tell us what happened behind the scenes in the lead up to one of the largest sporting spectacles in this world.
Well, it happened quite some time back. I used to work in this company called IMG. I was running the India operations. And I'd come back to India. My mandate was to turn around the business. It had been in India for 15 years, but hadn't made profits. And I looked at fashion, which was one of the larger businesses in India. I didn't know anything about fashion, but I just sort of got it right financially. And then I looked at the Chennai Open, again, setting the financials right on that. And then out of the blue, I was called to a meeting in London, and that's where my boss was too. And the BCCI wanted to meet us. So we went off to meet a certain Mr. Modi here. He wasn't that well known then. He was known more for his business connections. And the meeting was held at a place in London called Cadogan Gardens, in a tiny boutique hotel. It's normally meant for visiting royalty. And my boss knew Lalit a little bit. I hadn't met him before. But it wasn't very friendly meeting. It was strictly business. And the BCCI gets a fair share of criticism from people around. But I got a brief that day that I'm quite sure, and I've interacted with a lot of other sports bodies, I'm quite sure no other sports body would have been capable of delivering. The brief was very simple. They said Indian domestic cricket is going through serious problems that would ultimately affect the Indian national team and cricket in India. Well, so somebody had said this is a problem that is defined. Domestic cricket means a Ranji Trophy. They're saying that there is no audience for domestic matches.
Right.
So you are going away from cricket to a whole lot of other sports. You have a low female audience that's getting even lower. You have a oldish audience to start with, and the same audience of 10 years back is still your prime audience today. And most important, good talent is not being drawn to cricket as a profession because of the nepotism in the sport and stuff like that. Yeah? So it was my first meeting with Lalit, and well, I was quite impressed. Not for all the stuff that he's known for, but just for his clear thinking. So I returned to India, got to work on the solution to the problem. That's what the IPL was. Right? There was a problem in front of us. How do we find a solution? Huh? It didn't have that name.
You're saying it was actually in response to a brief.
That's right. It was in response to a brief. It was a clear thought out brief saying that there's a problem that Indian cricket is going to face. It's facing right now at the domestic Ranji Trophy that nobody's bothered about. But it would hit cricket in general too. That's what it was.
What impressed you about Lalit?
Well, like I said, I'd say he's the best client I've had. You normally have to give the client all the credit, so he gets all the credit for the IPL. So actually, it was IMG who did the design, concept, business model, selling the media rights, selling the teams, right? But I have to give him a lot of credit because the brief that came to us was really, really good. It was better than many, many marketing briefs I've got when I was working in advertising. It laid down 1, 2, 3, 4 problems, and I like that. And moving on from there, as we got to actually creating the product that was the IPL, I really want to give him a lot of credit because he sold it to a lot of people internally in BCCI, people who didn't have such clear thinking, who didn't know much about cricket too, and he was willing to swallow his ego to one by one persuade them that this was the route to go. Because it meant actually, if you look at it, giving up a lot of power. When I look at the problem of talent not being attracted to the sport, and that's because of the nepotism at the state level and leading on to the national level, right? And that's what really gets people to say, I'd rather go do my BCom, do my engineering. That's what parents would tell a kid, rather than go follow cricket as a career. Right? So one of the key aspects of what we did was to say that selection would be in the hands of private owners. Let capitalism come through there, and not some cricket board. And that was a very, very big sort of power to give up, and he was able to sell that through to them. It was a task to sell it to him, but he was able to sell it through to them, and that's why I'm saying he was one of the best clients I've ever had.
Which is amazing. So creating a sports league is not new, right? You must have had decades of learning across the NBA, EPL, NFL, etc. But what you were dealing with was a very unique problem, isn't it? You only had, for example, a window of 2-3 months. The format itself, which is T20, did not really have a long history in India at that point. And we, up until then, never really had a culture of foreign players coming and playing in the domestic league and all of that, right? What are some of the alternate models that you considered dropped before deciding on what we know today as the IPL?
Okay, as a background, we studied a lot of teams around the world. I've met NBA teams, NBA investors, MLB, the whole works of the EPL people, some sports academy divisions, all of that. But finally, we had to do something that hadn't been done before. All of those were organic teams, teams that grew over time, and then the league was created. Here we had to create a league sort of inorganically, creating new teams all over. Right? So that was not an easy one to get through. Like I said, the key aspect was that selection would be in the hands of the private sector by private owners and not by the sports, not by the BCCI, and that's what they wanted to do. That was logically what they thought they would. And that was a big sort of no-go for us. We said that it wouldn't work that way. And one of the key things that we actually wanted to see was how could we get a lot more entertainment into the sport. We could have kept it strictly as a sport. That was again a decision. And then but we didn't want to get it too frivolous. That's a risk we'd be running. But we said, let's get some entertainment here. Youth wants entertainment. Youth doesn't want a five-day-old game. Youth doesn't want to be seen watching a fuddy-duddy game. So we want to add a little bit of glamour, dynamism, and a lot more data into the game. And all of these were looked at as means to attract the youth. And we thought addressing the women audience, the female audience, we would need to get it obviously much shorter, get it simpler also, and add a little bit of glamour to help the whole thing along. Yeah. Right. As far as talent goes, we were really determined that we wanted world-class scouting and retention of talent. And that's where the best of capitalism works. We want to get the world's best experts coming in over here. And we want to make sure that we have a model that works very well for teams. It would work only if teams worked. And we wanted the teams, privately owned teams, to run like goal-oriented entities for profits, for individual glory. And one other aspect, finally humans run on tribal instincts. And we wanted to get tribalism in a big way. And that's why we placed the condition of a few under 21 local players for each team. So they know that from Rajasthan, you're going to get a Rajasthani youngster in there. For Hyderabad, you're going to get a Hyderabadi youngster in there. We had the local icons too, Lakshman, Dravid and the rest. So tribalism was a very, very important thing to build, because typically when organic teams are built, the tribalism was taken for granted. My boss in London, he'd support a EPL team because his dad supported it. Over here, we didn't have that track record. We needed to create the tribalism. So that was a big, big task ahead of us. And I think that worked pretty well. Even though our cities tend to be fairly heterogeneous, we've got Bangalore thinking Bangalore, Chennai thinking Chennai, and that worked really, really well.
Even after all of this, I'm guessing it couldn't have been an easy ride getting this on the road, right? In fact, I've heard many stories of how at multiple occasions the IPL almost didn't happen. Is that true?
That's something very few people know about. Well, it's a sequence of things. First, you need to get the players in. So we were able to convince all the local boards, all the cricket boards, country boards to allow their players to play in over here. We had to give them individual and collective stops to make sure that happened. But that was the first step, get the players on board. Then the actual revenue, and revenue is key to everything, the revenue had to come in from media rights. And we approached a lot of possible media companies. And at one point, we got sort of fobbed off by a lot of them. So we turned it around and we said, let's have this event in Jaipur where we invite media companies to come there, make presentations to show why they are good enough to be empaneled. So that worked a little bit. And they all came there and made presentations to show why they're good enough to handle the rights for this. And so that worked pretty well. We used a lot of public relations, all of that stuff. And the bids were to be open on a Monday. On Thursday, I had 8 good bidders. But then that's what happened. On Friday, 2 dropped out. On Saturday, 2 more dropped out. On Sunday, finally, 2 people merged and I only had 2 bidders left. The 8 bidders I had became 2. And you can't have 2 people bidding. If they ever knew that's a fact, you'd have no bids coming through, no serious bids coming through at all. So all I did was, the people who told me that they're backing out, I said, just keep it absolutely quiet. One of these was a private equity fund, a $20 billion private equity fund, who analyzes much more in detail than anybody else would. But they dropped out on 2 days before. So that's how close we came to failure. If these 2 people had known that there were only 2 in the fray, we wouldn't have gone through at all. We'd have bid below the reserve price and said, take it or leave it. That's how close we came to failure. On Monday when we opened the bids, there was one bid that was way, way above the reserve bid. And that's the one we went with. That was Sony WSG bid. But nobody knows how close we came to failure. And it's at that point that a lot of people drop out of the glory stakes. I was left virtually on my own to handle that at that point.
Was that the only time the IPL was, so to say, threatened?
So that's the first milestone, selling the media rights. So we got a lot of money in. That money was what we used to attract teams. Logically, we're sharing a lot of that revenue with the team. So they know, wow, okay, that much revenue is going to come into me every year. So that's what attracts teams. So we did a lot of work around that, attracting people. We did a lot of marketing, direct marketing, a lot of stuff around that to attract prospective owners from India and outside of India. But when the time came to open the bids, I had eight teams to sell. I got only 10 valid bids. So many people said they were interested but didn't actually come through. And so we just scraped through again over there. After that happened, well, a lot of people said, I want to buy a team, but that was too late. But according to the process that we laid out, we could well have landed up with less bids than the number of teams we had. So that's how close again we came to failure the second time around.
When you see the IPL of today and, 13 years have passed since the incident that you just narrated happened, what is the aspect of, the version that we see today that is a direct result of some of the decisions that you might have made back then? Is there an aspect of the game today that is in a certain way because, of the decisions all of you made back then?
You see, one very important design component that we laid down there was the salary cap. I looked at the EPL then, and I can tell you then, it's changed a little bit now, that it was so non-competitive. You knew there were 3 teams that were going to be in the top 3 all the time. If you look at the La Liga, there are 2 teams. Right? So
right.
I didn't want it to be so non-competitive. And you find that for almost every league around the world. There are very, very few leagues that are truly competitive. And I said one clear aspect, we are inviting private businesses to come in. They could all be billionaires, but somebody would have still 10 times the money that somebody else has. So I didn't want it to go through the Galacticos syndrome. I didn't want one team to have so much money that they knock out the rest. So the salary cap was put in there. And I remember Vijay Mallya telling me, you're being pseudo-socialistic by going into this. Because, he was one of the players who would have paid 5 times what other guys would have done. But it's a salary cap that is, like it or not, help the teams be competitive. In this year, more than a decade past, you'd see how competitive it is.
Right.
You still don't know.
Yeah.
SRH came up from the bottom to the top. Every team had and this was one of the most competitive IPLs ever.
Yes.
And it's because we really didn't want 2 or 3 teams to keep doing it. And if you remember the first year, Rajasthan Royals, the one who were the stingiest, they won.
Yeah.
So that's one aspect that has stayed through all the way. And another one was we really wanted youngsters to come up from this. And you find now the Indian national team has benefited so much from the IPL.
Yes.
You see the team to Australia, you see so many have come from the IPL.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like you said, if you look at the team going to Australia, this week, from Shreyas Iyer to KL to Washington Sundar to Deepak Chahar, so many of them owe their popularity to the IPL, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's not popularity, it is a chance to play against the world's best bowlers. Yeah. If you see a guy like Ruturaj Gaikwad, and he's battling with the world's fastest bowlers, if he's playing well there, wow, he's going to play well somewhere else too.
Absolutely.
So it's not just the popularity, they are actually going through baptism by fire. Those who make it will really play for India very soon.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if I take someone like a Sanju Samson, while it is extremely belated, his entry to the national team, but I'm saying when it comes to unearthing a talent like that, or even Jadeja to a certain extent, I think the IPL has played a huge role in that, isn't it?
That's right.
Ideally, this chat about the IPL should be a separate episode by itself. But I want to quickly pivot to another sport that you helped shape, which is tennis in India. As many in the audience will know, the Chennai Open was for many years the only ATP event in the country. And it was a source of pride for many of us residents of the city. While it always had a marquee lineup, I think watching Pez and Bhubati live was really the high point of that event, right, over many, many years. But I distinctly remember, I think the year was 2008, when we had a special guest, a certain Rafael Nadal, who I think, if I'm not wrong, was just fresh from winning his 3rd French Open or something like that. And that really raised the bar to the ultimate level. Right? Chennai has always had a rich tennis tradition, but that for me was a landmark moment. How did that happen?
Okay, I can't take any credit for building tennis as a culture in Chennai. That happened long back from the Krishnans and all of those guys, Vijay Amirraj.
Right.
When I came on to IMG, again, the Chennai Open wasn't doing very well financially. So I tried to set that right. And one of the key things was we weren't getting enough stars to come in. So I thought, let's reach for the stars. and try to get Senior Nadal in. And it helped because IMG managed both Federer and Nadal at that time. And the head of tennis was a Spanish guy, Fernando Soler. And I was able to work on him, and he got Nadal in over here. So Nadal is world's best. Huh? Really, really right on top. And that really lifted the tournament to a different level. And we got all of Chennai, we got sponsors, we got media, everybody interested. And that sort of helped to turn around the event. And that really was something. And he's an incredible guy. He's not so articulate as some others, but I'd say he's the most gentlemanly tennis player that you can see around. Incredible guy.
Right. I think this entire era of tennis has been very unique in the sense that we have a lot of nice guys finishing first.
Yeah, that's right. Actually through this I got to know Vijay through, and Vijay Amrita is a good friend now, and he's an incredible guy. I mean, India should be proud of somebody like him who's done so much for tennis. He's worked on the ATP, and even now he's done so much for ex-tennis players. You know, there is an issue with many sportsmen. They typically finish their careers very early, some of them even earlier than they expected because of injuries, and then their life can be a mess. If you look at Bjorn Borg, if you look at Roscoe Tanner, if you look at Boris Becker, Tang Chatri, all of that happens. So Vijay has done a lot for tennis players to see that they have some sort of stability in their later lives. And that's very important for many, many sports.
And that's not so much headline news as some of the other things. Yeah. I absolutely love the insight that comes through whenever he speaks. And he also has a fairly good wine under his brand name as well. I should mention this at this point. But one question I wanted to ask you was, I think the Chennai Open and now the Maharashtra Open, or whatever it is referred to, has done a lot for Indian tennis. You were also associated with futsal, which was a phenomenon by itself. It continues to be as a sport in urban India. But somehow these have not done to, or for that matter, ISL, which happened later, etc. Somehow, popular narrative at least, is that these are not done to those respective sports what an IPL has done to cricket. Right? What do you think are some of the challenges, when it comes to even a sport as popular as football or tennis?
Well, I'd just say a little bit. I think these leagues, after the IPL, almost everybody wanted to create a league in different sports. And many of them have approached me. Now the issues, I finally look at the financials of it. Not everything can attract the money that you need. Yeah. But I wouldn't say that they haven't done the sport some good. Many of them have done the sport some good. At least they've given the players a little more money than they used to earn earlier. So whether it's table tennis or badminton or anything, or even football, a lot of footballers have benefited from that. Now the issues, whether these entities are financially, have reached financial viability yet, almost none of them have. Kabaddi comes close to it, but almost none of them have.
Right.
But if you take sports like Kabaddi, the Kabaddi League has done a lot for Kabaddi players. A lot of them are earning maybe 100 times what they would get earlier. So it's got that much, but sustainability needs financial viability. Many of them are quite some distance from that.
You speak about this aspect a lot, right? I think looking at the financials of a league and sort of making it better, etc. Right? What are some of the for the uninitiated, who's listening to this? What are some of the components that sort of determine whether the league is financially sustainable or not?
Well, when I finished with the IPL, I made a famous prediction that I hope nobody remembers. Is that I said cricket is going to see a decline from now on. Yeah? Because it seems logical that a sport, no other country has a sport that takes up so much revenue. Huh? And you think that more and more globally exposed audience, you're going to have other sports getting up there. But the plain fact is cricket revenue has increased from that time. From 2008 to now, cricket revenue has increased massively. Yeah? And finally, there is only this much. The wallet size is only going to be this much. So while the badminton league has world-class badminton, the Indian audience doesn't value it enough for the media rights to make it worthwhile. And the same holds true for almost every other sport. Almost every other sport. So that's basically where the first problem comes in. Are you going to get enough for media rights to make the whole thing worthwhile?
Right.
Yeah? And media rights over time could move from advertising to consumer subscription. But when that does happen, maybe the models will change.
When I look around myself, whether it is art or sports or live events or music or concerts, all the cultural realities around us, or in other words, pop culture around us, in a way, is underwritten and kept alive by marketing money. You spoke about media rights, but even that is a function of a brand's spending, isn't it? That is fundamentally eventually monetized by a brand's marketing money. What is your take on the role brands have played in developing sport in India overall?
Well, I think sports is such a magnet for brands all over the world. It's because it stands for vitality, it stands for youth, dynamism, competition. In many countries, it's about patriotism. In many things. So it works so well for a lot of brands. And also the big aspect for sports is the fact that you've got human brands over there. And I've spoken about this earlier. Human brands, they extract more passion from consumers than any consumer brands do. Whether it's a Federer, Nadal, or Muhammad Ali, or anybody you can name, Virat Kohli, they get much more passion than any consumer brand across FMCG services can. So brands love to be associated with these human brands. So that's one thing that really attracts brand to sports. The caveat to that is that human brands tend to be fragile. They're not as well managed and controlled as the normal consumer brands are. And I remember after saying this at a seminar, 3 months later, the Tiger Woods incident happened. Yeah, and we were handling Tiger Woods there. But it's a fact of life. Those human brands are very, very strong, but they're fragile too. And brands are attracted to sport because of these human brands. It's not just because of the numbers, the millions that come in over there.
Right. I think that's a great place for us to take a very quick break. When we come back, I want to speak to you about something else that you've been doing, which has had a much, much bigger impact on the world around us and in India especially, which is blooddonors.in. Stay with us. We'll be right back on the Filter Coffee podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to an awesome, amazing, incredible week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you're not following us on social media, please do. Why aren't you? You should. It's absolutely essential that you do. It's IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Another fun week in the books last week, and I think you guys should definitely check out some of the shows that we did. So first, let me tell you about Cock and Bull. We did 2 Cock and Bulls on Cyrus Says last week, which is, I don't think we've ever done before. But there was just so much to talk about, and it was fun. The first one was just on Thrish, myself, and Cyrus. The second one, we had Abhijit Ganguly on, and that was a great episode. Do check that out. Check out Know Your Kanun as well. It's been a while since I spoke about that show, but Umber's been doing a great job on it. This week he spoke to Naina Sharma, a Canadian lawyer, about the ways that you do business in Canada and the challenges that presents. Definitely very interesting stuff. Do check that out. The guys at Naan Curry are doing some really, really fun stuff. Do check out their latest episode. They talk about roti, the simple bread, but it's got some complications to it. Let them tell you about what they are. Do check that out. Also, do definitely check out the Wire Talks with Siddharth Bhatia. He's been killing it, man. It's just a new show, but what great conversations. This week, he had Siddharth Singh on to talk about pollution. Do check that out. And you know what, guys? The best news of all, Simplified is back. They've been back for a few weeks and I haven't called them out before, but remember that they're back and do check them out. This week, they talk about, does censorship make sense? Knowing the guys, I think I know the answer to that, but you should go check that out. And with that, let's go back to your show.
Welcome back to the Filter Coffee podcast. We're speaking to Balu Nair about sport and blood donors in fact, I came very close to calling this episode blood sport because of the 2 different parts of your career. Of course, there are many other angles to this as well. But jokes aside, I feel that we have a systemic issue when it comes to blood or organ donation in India. We'll get to that in just a bit. What was your inspiration? At this point, I think it was it 2008 when you started Blood Donors?
Yeah, okay, I'll tell you how it started. In 2006, I think, I was working at Yahoo, and I was part of a very large team that was looking at the acquisition of Facebook. This was many years back when Facebook was just a few million users.
Right.
So I was involved because I was looking after mobile for Asia, and Friendster was even larger than Facebook at that time. It was a social media network. And that got me thinking. A very stupid question came to my mind. Why do you want to network with friends? I said, why can't I create a network of strangers? It makes more sense to do that, I thought. All right. So I said, yeah, let me try doing this. I want to create a network of strangers helping each other. And I said, yeah, how can they help each other? The obvious route is money. But that would have meant a platform of Nigerian scams. No offense to Nigerians, but yeah, you know what it is. So the currency, therefore, that I chose was blood. That's how a stranger could help some other stranger. And then I looked at the problem. Like any startup, you look at the problem that you're addressing. India has a massive problem. We run short of 3 million units per year. 3 million units of blood per year. And if somebody doesn't get the blood, they can die. And there was something in the Times of India, sometime in May, somebody in Pune, it was a city like Pune, died in a hospital because he couldn't get blood. A common group of blood, B+. It hadn't reached us. We didn't know about it. I heard about it after it happened. So it's a silent killer. There are thousands and thousands who die around the country because they don't get blood. So that's why I said that's a problem that could be looked at, and the currency of my network was blood.
I want to take a couple of steps back to what I feel is a systemic problem in India. When I used to live outside India, in the office where we all worked, in the office building, every few months there'll be this bus or a large van which is fitted with blood donation equipment, which will come and park itself in the lot, and many employees will go and donate blood over the course of a day. That way there'll be like a positive peer pressure to do that as well. And this is not just there, right? You could do this in malls and many other places where public congregate. When I look at the Indian scenario, it seems to be very, very different, right? Blood donation is something that seems to be relevant, or something that seems to happen only when there is a large need for it, or only when a family member has a need for it. Is this a uniquely Indian situation or problem?
No, not at all. Actually, there are many countries. It's a global silent killer. There are an estimated 100 million unit shortage around the world every year.
Okay.
All of Africa, all of South America, lots of Asia, and even parts of Europe, there's a blood donation shortage. And this is pre-COVID. Post-COVID, even the US is experiencing blood donation shortage. So that is a major issue. Somehow it seems to be that the less developed countries, and that's a function of health infrastructure, have much more of a blood donation shortage than the others do. And though there are countries in Europe which have this shortage too. Some of it, again, comes to giving blood, helping a stranger versus being very tribal and helping only people around you. So it could be related to that.
This reminds me of my last blood donation before the pandemic, and it was for platelets. And as you and many in the audience will know, not anybody can donate platelets. You'll have to go for a test, and then you have to be qualified for you to be able to. And after the test, they will tell you whether you can donate platelets or not, depending on various counts. And after the donation that I made, which was incidentally through blooddonors.in, I was having a small chat with the family members, and they told me that I was probably the 135th or the 140th person they had personally gotten in touch with to meet the kind of need they had on a weekly basis for their family member. And I found that astounding, right? The logistics of having to do this. And the burden of this in India always seems to be with the patient or the patient's family, which I find extremely unfair, because they are the ones who are also going through the stress, the trauma of the family member being unwell to begin with, isn't it? This again I found to be an extremely uniquely Indian situation. And the question in my mind was, shouldn't the hospital, which is getting paid for this, shouldn't the onus be on them?
Oh, definitely. See, like you say that the hospital puts the onus on the patient. That's simply because of the demand-supply issue. If the hospital blood banks had enough blood, they wouldn't tell the patient to go find blood for themselves. Right? I wouldn't blame the hospitals. It's simply a matter of fact of we don't get enough donors coming forward. Voluntary blood donors coming forward, we don't get enough of them. We don't have it in our culture, and it's something that we need to change. We probably need to change it right from the school level, colleges, and get it right up. That this is something you need to do, and you could be selfless about it, or you could also think, I'm donating blood today, tomorrow somebody I love could need it. So it's going to come back to you as a cycle. That's the way to live. So we need to develop this as a culture, as a youth culture, millennial culture.
Right. You mentioned about the genesis of this, where you're thinking of a network of strangers, and then you're thinking of, okay, why not blood donation, etc. At that point, how much did you know about, the blood donation situation, and how did you get to the actual product design, from that point?
Okay, well, I didn't know very much. I selected blood because I thought that was a analytically correct one compared to money, and I couldn't think of too many others. Organ donation typically happens after death, right? And you see how it's linked to culture. Most of these are linked to culture. A tiny country, Sri Lanka, donates more eyes than all of India does. And there's a function of culture. So I didn't know too much. I learned over time. But the issue is that in India, we have a clear, in a sense, helping a stranger doesn't come so naturally in that sense of giving blood. Maybe some superstitions around it. We help people with money, a beggar on the street, all of that, we do that. But we're not so forthcoming with blood. And it's probably linked to superstitions, cultural linked superstitions, cultural linked barriers that come up there.
To cross the cultural barrier, what I love about blood donors is the simplicity of it, right? The simplicity of how it is easy for you to sort of latch into the network, or for you to be contacted as a donor, or for you to benefit as a patient as well. Right? How did you arrive at this as such a lean sort of a design for this to work? Right? The other way of looking at this problem could have been create a massive consumer engagement sort of an infrastructure and get people to call and manage everything else. Right? Whereas this seems to be something that works mostly from a network effect, from a community perspective, rather than a large holding company.
Yeah, bang on. See, I wanted to use the network effect, and I didn't want to create a destination of my own, because that would involve a very, very different sort of resources to get there. I started this on another social media network, and after a year, I moved to Twitter. And that's for two reasons. The people on Twitter seem to be much more action-oriented than on other social media networks. Twitter tends to be an activist sort of platform. So people don't waste 1 minute in response to a blood donation request to call up colleagues, friends. People have created their own, and this is unique. We are a mother social media network. Our volunteers, and I'm saying thousands of volunteers, have their own WhatsApp, Facebook, and earlier TikTok groups where they take the request in from there and put it out there for their own geographical filtering done. Right? So that was quite amazing to see the level of engagement from people over there doing this. And the design really said, when I moved to Twitter, okay, one was the action-oriented thing. Second, when I get a request from a Mecheda or a Lakhimpur or a Tong, and I don't know anybody who knows anybody who lives there, 3 levels away, there would be no connection. Twitter helps beautifully in reaching such strangers. So that worked beautifully for us, because no other network gets so fast to such far off places, degrees of separation. Really, really Twitter helped in that. And it does even today. My geography has improved so much because we managed to fulfill requests in places I'd never heard of before.
Right. At this point, I just want to ask you a question that's more personal before we come back to blood donors. I think today there are, correct me if I'm wrong, more than 1.2 million people who follow, blood donors in. And I think the impact of what you do is felt across at least 40 odd cities. And I read a quote in somewhere where I think the estimated number of lives that blood donors in alone saves is about 8 lives a day. Needless to say, it's probably been the entity with the biggest impact when it comes to blood donation as an issue in India. Yet, 95% of the people who know blood donors or .in don't know who its founder is and don't know that Balu is actually associated with it. How does that work?
Okay. Well, when I started out, and this was a barrier to growth, I wanted it to be anonymous because this was to be an agnostic network. No religion, no caste, nothing matters. You're going to help a complete stranger. The minute I put my name up, you will get my apparent ethnicity, language, religion, all of that coming through. So it had to be anonymous for that. And I'd also studied, there's something called the founder syndrome, where the identity of a founder of a social cause, in many cases, subsumes the actual cause. So anything that founder does will impact the cause, or the founder's importance is so high that the cost actually gets relegated to a small minor pollution. Right. And then, lastly, anonymity is much more peaceful. Nobody knows who you are, rather than you don't have to stand up for and behave like an abnormally different person. You can be yourself like a normal life.
At this point, I want to speak about the pandemic. Someone like me who usually donates 3 to 4 times in a calendar year, I had completely stopped donating ever since the pandemic began. And for many people like me, it was the fear of going to the hospital and the risk of getting infected that came along with it. It is only now, after I had tested positive a few months back for COVID, and now that I know that I have a lot of antibodies, that I have now restarted again. But this must have been a huge hit for a nation which already had a lot of deficit as far as blood donation is concerned, like we mentioned in the introduction, isn't it? To a point where for the first time ever, you had posted an appeal on blooddonors.in talking about this and talking about how it is important for people to continue to donate, especially at this point. Talk to us about the impact of the pandemic.
Well, the COVID issue has hit blood donation around the world. Like I said, the US has a shortage. So everywhere it's a problem. And there are 2-3 aspects to it. One is about the lockdown itself. If I go to the hospital, is somebody going to stop me on the way? And we've had donors from Delhi, and this is being covered on TV. And he had a lot of problems in the check post to Gurgaon. He went to Gurgaon, donated and came back. Lots of problems that way. Second, and much more prevalent, is the issue of going to a hospital and the chance of an infection, the fear of an infection. But the issue, actually what's happened is we've got so many champions who have risen up and going out to donate. Our number of requests has gone up by 3x. Wow. More than 3x on some days, because blood banks are running dry. Friends and family are not willing to get out over there. So more and more you need the strangers to help you. But people are coming forth, and now we've also got this issue of the COVID recovered patients' plasma. So we get a lot of requests for that, and thankfully a lot of that is getting fulfilled. So we're happy to say that it is a big problem, but there are people who are rising to the occasion and getting things done.
We spoke about you being anonymous, etc., and you continue to run this organization while doing so many other things. For those who are not familiar with it, what is blooddonors.in? Is it something that you do is there a large organization behind it? Are there many people managing it? What happens behind the scenes?
It's only COVID that's got this thing of virtual organizations coming up. This virtual organization is something that I had in mind in 2008. So there are a bunch of people. There are some who run it. There are a lot of volunteers around, but it's not a strict hierarchical organization. There's a leader whom they don't know, and it works pretty well. People, tens of thousands of people log on every day and help others online plus offline, and that continues. So it's a very vibrant organization growing fast, but we're not like a typical organization with a hierarchy or offices or even people who meet face to face.
Right. So a large part of it is volunteers.
It's purely digital.
Right.
It's all virtual.
It's the only digital organization, isn't it? Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Right. I mean, it almost sounds like a like a money heist sort of a business model where people don't know who's actually running the show. Jokes aside, but what next? For Blood Donors, and I think safe to say that the vision that you would have probably had at the inception, I hope you have achieved it or probably even surpassed it to a certain extent. Right? I think not too many people in this country can walk around saying that an organization that they started is saving more than 8 lives a day. Right? How does this go from here? What else would you like to do?
Well, I tend to be a bit greedy on these things. At some point, you just rethink and say, is this enough? Yeah. And I've come to a conclusion it's not enough. And that's when I said I'll have to shed my anonymity, at least at a B2B level. And I'm looking at how can this grow really, really big. And two aspects. One, in India, how can we get out there? Because if you've got a 3 million unit shortage, there's so miles to go, miles to go. And I'm looking at how we can get a brand partner on who will embed themselves in the network and help this thing to really, really grow up. India has got 88 million college students. I'd love to evangelize this to them. And I know the kids of today would love to get onto something like this. We've got a lot of college students on our network already. Yeah? So I'd like this to really, really grow so that we can grow 100x. Not some small numbers. I really think that we need to grow 100x to get this somewhere else. And that 100x should not just come from India. This can travel around the world. If you see in Asia itself, all of South Asia has this problem. Indonesia has this. China has got this. All of Africa, South America. USA is going through it now. Lots of Europe has this. So I like to see how we can get this really global. There are no similar P2P blood networks anywhere. So that's something that I will be looking to get.
Right. Got it. And it'll be lovely to see, brands and marketing investors sort of get on with a cause like this. If I look at least the last 10, 12 years of what you've spent time on, like I said at the beginning of the episode, the common thread to all of this seems to be a very simplistic but extremely effective product design, right? Whether it is the IPL, or whether it is the Chennai Open, or whether it is blooddonors.in and multiple other things, that you have evangelized. If you had to share, 3 things that you believe the most, should be part of a strong product design, what will those aspects be? What would impress Balu when it comes to product design?
Well, it's not actually, I won't say rocket science. I studied rocket science in college. So the rocket science is not that complex. But yeah, it's not something so complex. It's about making sure the experience for consumer is really, really, really good. And something I learned when we developed on the mobile front is even if the consumer makes a mistake, make sure that you correct it for him. It's something that Google has done many years later. You spell something wrong on Google, they correct it for you and still give you the right search result. We used to have cricket on SMS, cricket scores on SMS. It was one of our most popular services around. And it's incredible how people who are not tech savvy, all of them got onto such services. And our one marketing task was to say CKT, send it to this number 1 to 3, and you get your score, right? But invariably, as happens, Chinese whispers gets in place, and CKT is taken as CRC, CK, anything like that. And so people send us a lot of wrong sports codes for that. And the typical answer would be it's wrong, and you send them a message, say error. So I said that person is spending 2 rupees or 3 rupees. he wouldn't want to see error there. He'll never come back to me. So we understood that it was cricket, made sure he got the right cricket score and told him the right one is this. And that's when he said that consumer makes a mistake, make sure that we don't make sure that he pays for that mistake. He's my customer, make sure that he still gets the service that he wanted. And I think that really, really helped. And it's something that Google has followed many years later.
Right. Which year was this when you did this for Hutch?
I think this would be 2001 or so.
Wow. Extraordinary.
So one would be that really get the experience really right. And I would definitely look at how to do things so differently that creativity really, really shows through. Yeah, because that creativity is, you're having fun is one aspect of the creativity, but also doing it differently is going to be a challenge that will result in a sense, changing the world in some way. Yeah? You don't just want to follow a rule book and do things. You want to break a lot of rules and then do things. And that's something I really like doing in any product design.
In this entire journey with blooddonor.in, there are so many stories that we read about, in the press. Right? Recently, I was reading a story in Mint, about a person, who just broke down when one of the volunteers had called him and told him this, etc. Right? Do you have a personal story that you have witnessed where the impact of blooddonors.in was very palpable, something that moved you the most?
Well, I only have about 1,500 of them. I can write a book on them.
I'm sure. For more than a decade, 8 lives a day, there must be millions of stories. But something that has stayed with you, something that you would remember.
I just say one of them. A few. There were twins from a place called Bind in Madhya Pradesh, 12-year-old, and it was a very rare case. They both got cancer at the same time, and looking at where they're located, there weren't enough facilities to treat them right. So they were told to go to AIIMS in Delhi. Their parents could just about afford the train fare, went there, helpless. And you know how it is. This is typically a use case. People come to Tata Memorial or to AIIMS in Delhi, and they don't know anybody in the city. And something like cancer, you need lots of donors. So somehow it reached us. And this could be two levels of separation. It reached us, and we were able to get 20 donors for the kids. They're okay today. But there are many, many such cases. Somebody recently told us on a handle that my mom passed away. For the last 7 years, she needed blood, and we only got it from you guys. For 7 years, she needed it regularly, and it kept coming from volunteers from your place. Yeah. So there are many, many such cases. There was this person in Tonk who needed blood. It somehow reached us, and there was this guy from Jaipur who took a 1.5 hour bus journey, went to Tonk, donated, and came back the same day. There are lots of such cases of older people, younger people helping complete strangers. And there are many, many such cases.
Well, we usually end the episode by asking our guest what he or she is listening to or watching or reading. I don't know how much time you have between all the things that you are extremely busy with. But anything that you have read or anything that you're watching which you would love to recommend?
I'm watching The Queen's Gambit. I think that's a beautiful, very, very nice film. It's a series, and I love chess. I play blitz chess, and it was so real. It looks almost biographical. So I think I really like that.
So that was our episode with Balu Nair. Amazing, wasn't it? If you feel inspired by the conversation we just had and the issue of blood donation, I would strongly urge you to visit blooddonors.in and register yourself as a donor so that they can find you for the appropriate case when there is a need. Stay safe, and I'll see you next week with yet another episode of the Filter Coffee Podcast. If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcasts.com. You can also follow us on our social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram. And if you want to reach out to me, I am _Karthik, that's Karthik with an H, on Twitter, and filter_coffee, that's coffee with a K, on Instagram.
Whether you're an established sports person or a budding one, or simply a sports enthusiast, join us, Tanvi and Shlok.
We are two passionate pro badminton players talking policy, mindset and everything sport.
So tune in to The Millennial Athlete every Monday.
Only on the IVM Podcast Network.
Trust us, it's gonna be lit.
Entertainment is like food for the brain. It's a window to culture and a great way to understand the world around us. The internet has changed what it means to be an entertainer, creating new storytellers with millions of fans. It has spawned a new breed, the story sellers, those behind the scenes creating the business for this ecosystem. They work with brands, platforms and channels who are keen to capitalize on an audience hungrier than ever for more stories. I'm Vineet Kanabar, and I have a ringside view to how stories are told and sold. On my show, I bring you creators, artists, executives, and marketers for a freewheeling conversation around the business of entertainment. Tune in to Storytellers and Story Sellers for personal stories, analysis, and criticism every Thursdays as I talk to the brightest minds telling or selling great stories today.